It's always really interesting to learn about the history of wrestling promotions that I have not that much knowledge of. And well, today we're checking out how Eric Bischoff and Hulk Hogan ruined TNA, a wrestling documentary. If you guys want to support the original creator of the content, go ahead and click the top link in the description. Show us some love. If you want to react to content with me and the flock live on Twitch, you know where to find that link. It's at the bottom. Without further ado, let's check out what's going on here. I'd like to learn some stuff. I want some knowledge. And knowledge is power.
By 2008, TNA was finally gathering momentum. The company had a unique product, showcasing a six-sided ring and the high-flying X division, and talents like AJ Styles and Samoa Joe were becoming household names amongst fans. TNA had a seriously deep roster of former WWE superstars too, and their fan base was growing all around the world. Everything seemed to be in place for a breakthrough, and then they signed Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff. Just 4 years later, and the men would leave the company in a far worse state than when they arrived. TNA Wrestling was founded in 2002 by Jeff and Jerry Jarrett to fill the void left by the closure of WCW and ECW. The unique selling point of this new promotion was a weekly pay-per-view model, but despite a talented roster, they soon started to struggle. It proved difficult for them to build an audience when fans had to pay $9.99 each week in order to keep up with the show. Production quality.
That's kind of a crazy ask back then. Like, you gonna pay $10 a week? Then again, they did have peak though. They definitely had motherfuckers going out there putting in shwork. Not just work, shwork. $10 a week though? How long do they keep that up?
Issues made the shows look less polished compared to WWE, and fans could just watch Raw and SmackDown for free each week. Everyone expected the place to go out of business. That was until Panda Energy stepped in and purchased 72% of the company, and it became a family business with Dixie Carter running things backstage. With Panda's support, TNA moved away from the weekly pay-per-view model and got a show on Spike TV in 2005. They signed major former WWE superstars and started touring internationally, but things were still far from perfect. Dixie was proving to be a poor leader backstage. She lacked experience when it came to running a wrestling business, and she was struggling to book the show and keep her stuff.
Oh, Bobby looks like a fucking toy. He does not look real. I forgot what I was gonna say. I definitely wanted to say something though. So like, was she the booker at some point? Was Dixie really out here booking the matches? Like, do you know what's going on, lady?
Staff under control. The turmoil behind the scenes started to affect the on-screen product. The pay-per-views were badly promoted and the matches often featured screwy finishes, and despite TNA turning a small profit, the fans were still not satisfied. Something had to be done, and Dixie thought that signing Hulk Hogan was the solution. Hogan's star power was expected to elevate the entire brand and hopefully attract more fans to the product, and the deal on the table was fantastic for the Hulkster too, as he would be getting paid $35,000 per appearance. According to Eric Bischoff, he negotiated that contract on behalf of Hogan, and after making that kind of deal, you can see why Hogan wanted Bischoff by his side in TNA. Dixie had no interest in bringing Bischoff in, but Hogan insisted. Hogan sat Dixie down and explained to her that Bischoff was the visionary behind WCW's turnaround in the mid-90s, and that with his star power and Bischoff's creative vision, they could easily put WWE out of business. And so the deal was done. On October
What a slime ball, huh? That man dirty. Hogan is dirty. That's crazy.
October the 27th, 2009, during a press conference at Madison Square Garden, Hulk Hogan announced that he and Eric Bischoff had signed with TNA. During the presentation, Dixie Carter said, "Our goal is to become the world's biggest professional wrestling company. Hulk defines professional wrestling, and we look forward to partnering with him in a variety of ways as we continue to grow TNA globally." Bischoff's influence as an executive producer was felt immediately. He argued that the six-sided ring was just a gimmick and it made TNA look like a joke. He said,
Nah, hard disagree. Hard disagree. That six-sided ring was definitely an identity thing, and they should have kept that shit, dude. Big pain. I already went over this spiel with the flock here on Twitch, but YouTube fellas, you got no how I stand on this. This is gas. This is heat to me. I don't think any fucking promotion has tried to copy this at all, dude. Like, what? This shit is heat. Pain. What the pain?
Said that people flipping the channel wouldn't recognise it as a wrestling show unless it was in a four-sided ring. Much of the fan base were immediately up in arms about the decision. To them, it was one of the things that made TNA feel unique and special. But there were bigger changes coming to TNA at the hands of its new executive producer.
Yeah, I definitely heard the bumps
Bischoff
were
had come
like
close to beating WWE back in the 90s when he was running WCW, but ultimately he was beaten by Vince McMahon in the Monday Night Wars, and WCW was put out of business. But now Bischoff saw an opportunity to get his own back. Bischoff, Hogan and Dixie Carter sat down with the executives at Spike TV and convinced them to give TNA a live Monday night show going head to head with WWE Raw. Fans were left baffled and scratching their heads, wondering how two of the supposedly brightest minds in wrestling and Dixie Carter could have come up with such a stupid decision. It must have been one heck of a persuasive sales pitch. Spike TV agreed to a special live episode of Impact on Monday, January the 4th, 2010, which would herald the on-screen debut of the Hulkster. The promotion for the show went through the roof, with TNA spending an absolute fortune on advertising. But before Hogan had even stepped foot in the Impact Zone, it became apparent that he was up to his old tricks. As the show came on the air, Mike Tenay and Taz welcomed their new broadcast partner to the company, Bubba the Love Sponge. Bubba was a radio DJ of the shock jock variety from Florida. He and Hogan were longtime friends, and Hogan got him on the TNA payroll as soon as possible. The fans hated having Bubba on the show, and it was an early sign that Hogan was only out to exploit the company for his own gains. In January 2010, he made some disgusting comments about the Haiti earthquake that killed 220,000 people, and it was reported at the time that the wrestlers backstage despised Bubba and couldn't believe that he'd managed to hold on to his job. Awesome Kong took issue with his comments and punched him in the face twice backstage, and yet TNA continued to employ him. Kong ended up quitting the company because of it. It was a clear sign of the metaphorical chokehold that Hogan had on Dixie Carter, and Bubba the Love Sponge wasn't the only one of Hogan's buddies to get a job in TNA. As Hogan strolled down to the ring on the first live episode of Impact, Scott Hall and Sean Waltman were shown at ringside. When Hogan started cutting his promo, Hall interrupted. Now, when me and Pac heard that Eazy-E was here, that Hulk Hogan was going to be here, and Big Kevin Nash has been here, that means one thing to us.
That's gross. That just feels weird. No, not like this.
Big paychecks, big sold out arenas, and big parties. as we all started getting flashbacks to WCW and the inmates taking over the asylum, the Hulkster snapped us all back into reality. He assured everyone that this time things were gonna be different. TNA was going to become the #1 company in the world. But we should have known better back then, that you can never trust a word that comes out of Hogan's mouth. In fact, it was almost insulting how Hogan didn't even try and hide his nepotism, and he'd already brought in Bubba, Scott Hall and Sean Waltman, but he still wasn't done for the evening. Bischoff showed up, who had no reason to be on TV as an executive producer, and everyone had just assumed that he was going to be working backstage for TNA and not as an on-screen personality. And then Hogan's nepotism became literal as they showed his own daughter, Brooke, sat at ringside. And just to ruin everyone's night, the Nasty Boys made their TNA debut. These two fat slobs were barely relevant in the 90s, but they ended up on the gravy train too, just because they were a couple of Hogan's best friends. I'm surprised Brutus didn't show up somewhere. The special live episode of Impact drew a 1.5 rating, while Raw, on the other side, scored a rating of 3.7. But TNA's performance was enough to convince Spike TV to allow Impact to go head-to-head with Raw on Monday nights, starting in March 2010. And sadly, this wasn't Brooke Hogan's only appearance in TNA, and she was announced as the head of the Knockouts division, a role that she had absolutely no right to play. And it was just blatant nepotism on behalf of Hogan. But Hogan had an ulterior motive in getting the kid on TV, and that was to promote her awful music career that nobody was interested in.
Damn. All right, guys. Gun to your head. Name me 3 Brooke Hogan songs right now. All right, you lost.
Brooke was involved in a storyline with the Aces and Eights where she played Bully Ray's love interest. Her acting was better in Hogan Knows Best, and that's not a compliment. The Aces and Eights was a biker faction who were inspired by the Sons of Anarchy TV show. It was one of Eric Bischoff's attempts to copy the NWO in WCW, and to begin with, it looked like a promising storyline. What made them so interesting to begin with was their identities were actually hidden, and fans were surprised to find out who was underneath the balaclavas. But it was a case of diminishing returns, and each reveal was more disappointing than the last. And when Garrett Bischoff was revealed to be one of the members, it was game over. Of course, Eric couldn't help himself but take a leaf out of Hogan's playbook and got his own son on the TNA payroll. This dweeb stunk up TNA for years, and he wouldn't have been anywhere near a TV-based wrestling show if it wasn't for his daddy. We even had to put up with a Bischoff versus Bischoff match on pay-per-view at one point. The Aces and Eights was actually Bischoff's third attempt at emulating the NWO, with the band being his first try. Kevin Nash, Scott Hall and Sean Waltman attempted to run riot like it was 1997 all over again, but all it proved was that Bischoff was a one-trick pony when it came to running a wrestling promotion. Original NWO member Hulk Hogan stayed away from the band, telling everyone that things were different now.
It's really interesting that they had a Bischoff pop up in LFG talking about like the factions episode, but like, what was the NWO the only like successful one that he had under his belt? I doubt that though, right? Because he still had like his hands in WCW in general. What was the faction landscape looking like back then in WCW? Like, it couldn't have all just been remixes of that same sort of deal.
But that all went out of the window at Bound for Glory in October 2010, when just like back in 1996, Hogan and Bischoff turned heel and formed Immortal. This was Bischoff's next attempt
Multiple
at
NWOs by
recreating the NWO. The only highlight here was Jeff Hardy's brilliant heel run, which came out of nowhere. During his time in Immortal, Eric became the evil on-screen authority figure in yet another WCW flashback. He concocted a storyline where he declared war on the high-flying X Division. For years, the X Division was one of the few things that TNA did better than WWE. Even when the chips were down, fans could look forward to their version of the Cruiserweights putting on a spectacular show. But Bischoff managed to make the division look pathetic by belittling its roster every week and then
Nah, what was that?
Make the division look pathetic by belittling it.
Come on, bro. It's be like, come on, bro.
Its roster every week and then by booking the Monster Abyss to win the title. He also introduced Fortune, which was a Four Horsemen knockoff featuring Ric Flair himself. Eric didn't just manage to make a mess of the creative side of TNA, he also wrecked the production side of things too. His master plan of going head to head with Raw every Monday night was a total disaster. Despite WWE suffering from its lowest ratings in history at the time, this was still a monumentally dumb idea and proved that Bischoff just had no fresh ideas at all. From March 2010, Impact got battered in the ratings every week by going head to head with WWE.
Oh, yeah, nah. Yeah, that's a ass whooping. Yeah, they bent you over. Nah, 0.62 is diabolical. Why can't we go below a 1? What the fuck is that? Jeez.
Before mercifully being put out of its misery and moved back to Thursdays. In a statement, Dixie Carter said, "Our fans made it clear that they preferred the Thursday night time period. We're looking forward to delivering what the fans are asking for."
Yo, how did that happen?
They tried to dress it up, but the damage was done. The company already looked second-rate compared to WWE, but now they were second-rate and being laughed at. Bischoff also insisted that Impact went live every other episode, and then they left the soundstage at Universal Studios and went on tour, all of which cost them an absolute fortune. They hardly ever managed to sell out any of the arenas they visited, even for the pay-per-views. They were renting out all of these huge arenas across the United States and
Bro, if I pay for one of these seats and like you still missing all that audience right there, just let me get closer to the ring for free, bro. Don't make me sit in my seat like that. That's not nice. Oh wow, that's unfortunate.
only selling a few thousand tickets, which was terrible business practice. The pay-per-view buy rate also plummeted during Eric Bischoff's tenure as executive producer. For example, the 2010 edition of Bound for Glory did around 40,000 buys on pay-per-view, whereas the 2011 show did just 25,000 buys. Compare this to WWE, they drew 180,000 buys for the Hell in a Cell pay-per-view in the same month, and things weren't much better on TV. In November 2012, Impact's TV rating was down 21% on the previous year, and they were barely achieving 1 million viewers a week. And no wonder, because the storylines were crap. The Claire Lynch storyline was an embarrassment involving AJ Styles, who was accused of having an affair with Dixie Carter and fathering a child with a drug-addicted woman named Claire Lynch. Lynch was portrayed by an actress.
What are we doing? AJ, no. AJ, no, not like this.
Who couldn't act, by the way, and the whole angle just dragged on endlessly. Bischoff took credit for this idea, by the way, and later said that he loved it. Obviously, the fans hated every second of it. And like that wasn't bad enough, the constant presence of Hulk Hogan turned even more fans off. He inserted himself in the never-ending Aces and Eights storyline, where he took on Bully Ray, who was having an affair with Brooke Hogan or some other crap. There were some rumblings that TNA was starting to struggle financially under the weight of all of these bad decisions. In October 2013, Hogan made his last appearance in the company, and then a few months later, TNA sent Bischoff home in order to finish out.
Oh, nah. Yo, what is that, bro? Bro, what is that? What did they use to make that? What is that, bro? Ew. Ew. Ew.
The rest of his contract. Just 10 days after Bischoff's departure, TNA licked its wounds and headed back to the same stage at Universal Studios.
That better be dog food
They
and water.
even eventually went back to the six-sided ring. But sadly, it was too little too late for Spike TV. They cancelled TNA Impact in July 2014. In the disastrous years that he was the executive producer of TNA, Eric Bischoff proved that he was just a one-trick pony. Apart from inflicting his useless son on the roster, he did nothing new. Lazily, he just went back to his WCW playbook, and this time around, none of it worked. And of course it proved that the mere presence of Hulk Hogan isn't enough to save a wrestling company, and both men turned out to be nothing more than snake oil salesmen. Truly, TNA never recovered from this period, and it certainly never got back to the promising heights that it achieved in 2008 before the arrival of Hogan and Bischoff.
I do kind of wonder what's up with TNA now. Like, where are they housed? Are they like a online show now or something? Or are they on like a channel? Like a TV network? Like what's up with them? TNA was on ESPN. Wow. They're on Twitch? What? What the hell? Okay, so it's online. You guys are confusing the shit out of me. He was like, what the fuck? I'm glad they're still kind of going. Damn. I think that goes to show just how careful you gotta be when it comes to like legacy acts or like legacy figures in something like wrestling. Because I mean, what worked back in like, X time period probably won't work again. You probably only struck lightning once. You caught that in the bottle that one time. Don't do it again. Don't do it again. Yeah, that is cool that they're still around though. Oof. Yeah. I'm not a fan of Hulk Hogan. I could care less about that man. Bischoff never did nothing to me, but based on what he's done to wrestling promotions, I can see why people kind of don't fuck with him. Man, that's wild. Yeah, that is true. November. Bischoff is kind of both sides of that coin. Um, Really interesting though. Really interesting to see. It's crazy when like you can pinpoint exactly when some shit is going downhill, and you can point at like even like without hindsight, people back then were probably like, "Yo, this is a bad idea. This shit is yo, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? What the fuck?" I think looking at those ratings would have had me pulling my hair out like, bro, ain't no way we got a 0.5. What the fuck? You're all fired. What the? I'm about to go in there and wrestle a fucking broomstick. But yeah, really dope video by Stunned by Wrestling. If you guys want to check him out, click the top link in the description. If you want to hang out with me and my flock live on Twitch and see stuff live, click the bottom link. I got a Patreon, free bonus content that you might be able to check out and enjoy. I don't know. I don't know. Either way, I'll see you around. Thank you so much to those of you that have made it over to the Patreon. I appreciate you.
I'm still hungry.